My name is Miles Hartley, and I'm a 44-year-old commercial architect living in Savannah, Georgia. Tonight, I found myself sitting in my home office, staring at an email that made my hands go numb. It was from my wife of 12 years, Kendra. She was supposed to be at a yoga retreat in Arizona. Instead, the timestamp showed 11:22 p.m. her time, and the message inside shattered me. I've moved your inheritance into my personal account. It's better this way. At first, I thought maybe I was reading it wrong, but then I saw the attachment. A blurry photo of Kendra standing on a balcony with some guy I didn't recognize, a man with a beard, holding a glass of wine. The sun was setting behind them. She was smiling, but not the smile I'd known for years. This one was brighter, freer, almost like she was a stranger. I shut my laptop slowly, the glow of the screen still burning in my eyes, and walked into the kitchen. I poured a glass of water, but it just sat there in my hand as I stared out at the backyard, the one we had redesigned together 3 summers ago. I could see the stone path I had laid with my own hands, and the hydrangeas she had carefully planted along the edges. Back then, it had felt like we were building something permanent. A home, a life. Now it felt like all of that had been nothing more than a temporary illusion. But what cut deeper than the betrayal was the money. $587,000. It wasn't just money to me. It was my Aunt Elaine's legacy. After my parents died when I was 14, she took me in. She worked double shifts as a nurse, sometimes coming home with her feet swollen and her hands trembling just to make sure I had everything I needed. She paid for my college, encouraged me to become an architect, and gave me a sense of stability I thought I had lost forever. When she passed away, she left me that inheritance with a single note: build something that lasts. That money wasn't for vacations or for luxuries or for anyone else to touch. It was sacred. It was trust. It was her sacrifice wrapped in every dollar. Now, Kendra had stolen it. And worse, she had stolen it without a second thought. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over her contact. A dozen thoughts collided in my head. Anger, confusion, heartbreak. I wanted answers, but more than that, I wanted to understand how the woman I had shared a life with could so easily dismantle everything I had built, not just with my hands, but with my heart. And in that moment, one thing became painfully clear. Kendra wasn't coming back, and no missed calls. No texts asking if I'd seen her message. Just silence, like Kendra had already stepped into her new life and closed the door on the old one. If I was being honest, the signs had been there for months. Her so-called yoga retreats grew longer and longer. At first, it was just a weekend away. Then it stretched to 4 days. Then an entire week. And every time she came back, something in her was just further away from me. Her phone was always face down on tables, the lock screen suddenly protected with a new password I didn't know. Our conversations, once effortless, had shrunk to the bare minimum. Short answers, distracted nods, excuses about being tired. 3 months ago, she started asking strangely specific questions about my inheritance. Where exactly was the money kept? Which accounts? Did I think it might be smarter to diversify where it was held? At the time, I didn't think too much of it. I just nodded, told her I'd look into it. But deep down, something about her interest felt calculated. I reopened my laptop and pulled up her email again. This time, I read it more carefully. No greeting, no Miles, no honey, not even a half-hearted attempt at formality. Just the cold declaration and the theft, like it was a simple line item on her to-do list. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed 6 words. Thanks for letting me know. Then I shut the laptop, drained the last of my water, and went to bed. Tomorrow would be a long day. But as I lay there in the vast emptiness of that king-sized bed, I realized something that should have bothered me, but didn't. For the first time in months, maybe years, I actually slept. And I slept well, knowing she wasn't coming home. What Kendra didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this moment long before she sent that email. I had sensed something was wrong, and I had moved the inheritance months ago. She had never been anywhere close to it. Her little stunt had done nothing but confirm what I already knew, and in its own way, given me all the evidence I would ever need. I thought back to the beginning, to the first time I met her. It was 15 years ago at an industry conference in Charlotte. She was standing near an exhibit booth, magnetic and confident, introducing herself as the founder of a new wellness brand she was trying to launch. She spoke with that kind of charisma that made you lean in without realizing it. She was looking for architects to design her first brick-and-mortar studio, and I, a young and ambitious architect still trying to make a name for myself, thought I'd struck gold just by shaking her hand. Back then, I believed she saw something in me. Maybe she did. But sitting there now, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, I couldn't help but wonder if she'd always just seen an opportunity. I was only 5 years into my career when I met Kendra, still hungry for projects that felt meaningful, projects that weren't just soulless office buildings or concrete parking structures. She came into my life at exactly the right moment. Within 3 years, we were married. We settled in Savannah, where my firm's headquarters were located, and bought a Craftsman on Victory Drive, the one with the wide wraparound porch she had always dreamed of. No children, by her choice. "The business is my baby," she used to say, and I understood. My buildings were mine. Hers were her wellness retreats and organic products. For a while, that balance worked. For 8 years, life was good. I designed buildings. She expanded her brand. We traveled when we could, hosted elegant dinner parties on that porch, and built a life that looked polished both on paper and in person. To anyone watching from the outside, we were solid. Then my Aunt Elaine got sick. The cancer was fast, aggressive, merciless. I took a 6-month partial leave to be with her in Atlanta. I spent my days shuttling between hospital rooms and pharmacies, holding her hand through chemo sessions, listening to her talk about the years she'd given up so I could have a future. Kendra came to visit twice. Twice in 6 months. "Hospitals depress me," she explained when I asked. I didn't push. I told myself people grieve differently, that she had her own way of dealing with it. But some part of me felt the distance growing. When Elaine died, it changed everything. She left everything to me. Her house, her savings, her investments. The money surprised me most of all. I had never realized how carefully she'd planned, how wisely she'd invested through the years she spent working double shifts as a nurse. Kendra was surprised too. Only, her surprise quickly turned into curiosity. Almost overnight, she began asking about financial planning, subjects she had never shown much interest in before. One night over dinner, she leaned across the table, her wine glass catching the light, and said, "We should put it toward expanding the business." Of course, by the business, she meant hers. I shook my head, keeping my voice steady. I need to think about what Elaine would have wanted. That was the first crack. Small, maybe even invisible to others, but I felt it. The cracks widened over time. Kendra began traveling more. Research trips, supplier meetings, retreats. Our phone calls were shorter, her voice distant, often drowned out by background noise that would suddenly go quiet when I asked who she was with. Then one afternoon, while she was away on yet another team retreat in Sedona, our neighbor Frank stopped by. We were standing on the porch, talking about the weather, when he said casually, "Saw someone dropping Kendra off last week." Late, wasn't it? He didn't say much more, but he didn't have to. The weight of it landed hard. "Thought you were out of town," Frank said that afternoon on the porch. I had been. A 3-day conference in Boston. His words hit me like a pebble tossed into still water, sending ripples through my chest. I thanked him politely for the homemade bread his wife had sent over. I didn't ask questions, didn't press, just filed it away in the part of my mind where uncomfortable truths tend to sit until they're ready to burn. After that, the changes came faster, subtle, but unmistakable if you knew what to look for. Passwords began shifting. Banking apps that had always been unlocked now required credentials I didn't know. Anytime I steered the conversation toward finances, she would cut it short, her answers clipped, her tone sharp, like I had just insulted her for asking. One night, I stepped out back and caught her on the phone, her voice low, hushed, but not somber. She was laughing in a way I hadn't heard in years. Not with me, not for me. When she saw me, she slipped the phone into her pocket. "Just Patricia from the studio," she said, breezing past me on her way inside. Patricia. The same Patricia who had walked away from the business 8 months earlier. I nodded, pretended to believe her, and didn't correct or lie. I just watched as she poured herself another glass of wine, her eyes fixed anywhere but mine, and changed the subject as if nothing had happened. The foundation beneath us was cracking, and only one of us was willing to admit it. 2 weeks before Kendra left for what would become her final retreat, my firm's financial advisor, Jerry, called. His voice was calm, but there was something in it, something cautious. "Someone's been trying to access information about your trust accounts," he said. "They're using your personal information, but they can't get past the security protocols." I gripped the phone tighter. "Which accounts?" I asked, though deep down I already knew the answer. "The inheritance funds," Jerry confirmed. "They tried your social, but couldn't answer the security questions." I thanked him, hung up, and sat at my desk for a long time. The late afternoon light stretched across the wood like shadows, marking time, and I realized I was no longer guessing. I knew. That night, Kendra poured herself wine again and sat across from me at the table, her fingers tracing idle circles on the stem of her glass. "We should simplify our accounts," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "It's silly to have so many separate logins and passwords. We should consolidate everything." I smiled faintly, like a man indulging a harmless suggestion. "You're probably right," I told her. "I'll talk to Jerry about it." The next day, I drove to Atlanta to meet with Rita Wallace, my aunt's attorney for more than 20 years, and now mine. I laid out my concerns carefully. No emotion, no accusations. Just facts. Rita listened in silence, her pen poised above a legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "Your aunt was wise to suggest the irrevocable trust structure," she said firmly. "The money is protected, regardless of what happens in your marriage. And if someone attempted to move those funds without authorization," her expression hardened, "that would be attempted financial fraud, with clear legal consequences." I nodded slowly. "Then let's document everything. And I want a monitoring system in place, something that alerts us the moment anyone tries to access, move, or alter anything related to the trust." Her eyes softened just slightly, but her tone remained professional. "Consider it done." When I got home that evening, Kendra was already packing for her next retreat. She kissed me on the cheek, barely more than a brush of lips, before walking to the door with her bags. "I might extend this one," she said, almost offhand as if rehearsed. Really dive deep into the practice. I helped her load the car, watched her drive away, then went back inside and opened my laptop. I didn't snoop through her texts, didn't scroll her emails, didn't call her friends or try to track her location. Instead, I opened a shared cloud folder we use for household documents. Buried inside a folder labeled Home Renovation Ideas, a project we'd once talked about starting this year, I found what I was looking for. Screenshots of my accounts, copies of old statements, notes about transfer protocols, even a photo of a whiteboard filled with numbers. My inheritance amount neatly written at the top, minus 20%, with the words transfer fee scrawled underneath. She had been planning this for months. I closed the folder, then walked through our house. Every piece of furniture, every framed print on the wall, every carefully chosen object suddenly felt staged like props on a set. Not a home, a performance, a story we had told ourselves and others about who we were. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel grief. What settled over me instead was a startling calm, a clarity I hadn't known in years. This wasn't a love story anymore. It was a transaction, and she was simply terminating it because she'd found something she believed was more profitable. That night, I slept in the guest room. By morning, I was already making calls, setting things in motion. So when her email arrived 5 days later, the one declaring she had moved my inheritance in her own account, I wasn't blindsided. I was ready. I waited exactly 24 hours before making my first move. No angry responses, no desperate phone calls, just quiet, methodical steps. The first was simple. I forwarded her email to Jerry, my advisor, and to Rita, my attorney. My message was only 2 words: documentation requested. And in that moment, I think she believed me. The next day, I drove to Atlanta to meet with Rita Wallace, my aunt's attorney for more than 20 years, and now mine. I laid out my concerns carefully. No emotion, no accusations. Just facts. Rita listened in silence, her pen poised above a legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "Your aunt was wise to suggest the irrevocable trust structure," she said firmly. "The money is protected, regardless of what happens in your marriage. And if someone attempted to move those funds without authorization," her expression hardened, "that would be attempted financial fraud, with clear legal consequences." I nodded slowly. "Then let's document everything. And I want a monitoring system in place, something that alerts us the moment anyone tries to access, move, or alter anything related to the trust." Her eyes softened just slightly, but her tone remained professional. "Consider it done." When I got home that evening, Kendra was already packing for her next retreat. She kissed me on the cheek, barely more than a brush of lips, before walking to the door with her bags. "I might extend this one," she said, almost offhand as if rehearsed. Really dive deep into the practice. I helped her load the car, watched her drive away, then went back inside and opened my laptop. I didn't snoop through her texts, didn't scroll her emails, didn't call her friends or try to track her location. Instead, I opened the shared cloud folder we use for household documents. Buried inside a folder labeled Home Renovation Ideas, a project we'd once talked about starting this year, I found what I was looking for. Screenshots of my accounts, copies of old statements, notes about transfer protocols, even a photo of a whiteboard filled with numbers. My inheritance amount neatly written at the top, minus 20%, with the words transfer fee scrawled underneath. She had been planning this for months. I closed the folder, then walked through our house. Every piece of furniture, every framed print on the wall, every carefully chosen object suddenly felt staged, like props on a set. Not a home, a performance, a story we had told ourselves and others about who we were. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel grief. What settled over me instead was a startling calm, a clarity I hadn't known in years. This wasn't a love story anymore. It was a transaction, and she was simply terminating it because she'd found something she believed was more profitable. That night, I slept in the guest room. By morning, I was already making calls, setting things in motion. So when her email arrived 5 days later, the one declaring she had moved my inheritance in her own account, I wasn't blindsided. I was ready. I waited exactly 24 hours before making my first move. No angry responses, no desperate phone calls, just quiet, methodical steps. The first was simple. I forwarded her email to Jerry, my advisor, and to Rita, my attorney. My message was only 2 words: documentation requested. Both Rita and Jerry confirmed receipt of the email. Neither needed further explanation. The paper trail spoke for itself. My next call was to Thomas Webb, a divorce attorney Rita had quietly recommended months earlier during what we'd called hypothetical conversations. His secretary fit me into the schedule that very afternoon. By noon, Kendra finally broke her silence with a text. "Did you get my email?" I replied with one word: "Yes." Minutes later, she responded, "That's all you have to say?" I didn't bother answering. Instead, I drove downtown to Thomas's office, where Rita joined us over video conference. Thomas adjusted his glasses as he flipped through the documents Rita had forwarded. "The attempted transfer creates a clear paper trail," he said. "You're in a strong position. The funds were inherited, never commingled with marital assets, and properly maintained in a trust structure. On top of that, she has now openly admitted to attempting unauthorized access." I leaned forward. "What's next?" He didn't hesitate. "We file for divorce immediately, citing financial misconduct. Georgia isn't a no-fault state when fraud is involved. This gives us leverage." I signed the paperwork before leaving his office. At 4:30 p.m., my phone rang. Kendra's name lit up the screen. I answered. "You're being childish," she snapped. No greeting. No "how are you?" Just irritation, sharp and defensive. "This doesn't have to be difficult." "I agree," I said evenly. "Then let's be adults about this. The money is already moved. Fighting it will just drain more in legal fees." "Where are you staying?" I asked, cutting across her argument. There was a pause. "What does that matter?" she shot back, her composure cracking for a second. "Just curious," I said quietly. Where home is now. She bristled. Miles, focus. We need to discuss the financial arrangements. Her voice was firm, but beneath it I could hear the smallest fracture, like a hairline cracking glass that no one notices until it spreads. I'm having my lawyer draw up settlement papers, Kendra said, her tone brisk, like she was negotiating a business deal. It's better for both of us to keep this clean. Who's your lawyer? I asked. David Lawrence. He's already reviewing everything. I jotted the name down on the notepad beside me. That's helpful. Thank you. She let out a frustrated breath. Are you even listening, Miles? This doesn't have to be difficult. You said that already, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. And I appreciate your concern for making this easy. There was a pause, a stretch of silence long enough that I could hear her shifting on the other end. Finally, she asked, her tone wary now. What are you doing? Nothing yet, I said. Getting used to the idea, I guess. I heard her exhale, the edge in her voice softening, mistaking my calm for surrender. It's for the best, she said gently, almost coaxing. We've been moving in different directions for years. This is cleaner than dragging it out. You're right, I agreed. Cleaner is better. After we hung up, I immediately called Thomas, gave him David Lawrence's information, and then sent Kendra a single text, taking some time to process. We'll reach out when I'm ready to discuss details. Her reply came seconds later. Don't wait too long. Papers will be ready by Friday. Friday, 3 days away. Perfect timing. At 6 o'clock, Rita called. Her voice was measured, but beneath it was the unmistakable weight of something serious. The trust company recorded 3 separate attempts to initiate transfers from your accounts today, she said. All blocked, all properly documented. The monitoring system captured everything. IP addresses, timestamps, failed login attempts. The location matches the origin of the email. Arizona? I asked. Yes. Scottsdale, Rita confirmed. Not Sedona. There was a pause, and then her tone sharpened. Miles, there's more. The system flagged suspicious activity from last month. Someone exported account details and transfer protocols while logged in through your home network. I sat back in my chair, the quiet of the house pressing in around me. Scottsdale, not Sedona, and a login from my own home. She hadn't just been careless. She'd been confident. Confident enough to do it under my roof that Rita's words echoed in my head as I walked through the house that night. The timestamps, the device identifiers, proof etched into digital stone. The rooms felt different now. Not like a home, but like evidence. Every photograph on the wall, every carefully chosen piece of furniture, all of it part of the story we'd staged for years. In the kitchen, I reached for the bottle of 20-year-old scotch we'd been saving for our 15th anniversary. I poured 2 fingers into a glass and let the burn settle into me. Kendra thought she'd set the trap. She had no idea she'd walk straight into mine. The next morning, the phone rang. David Lawrence. His tone was careful, professional, but I could hear the caution beneath it. Mr. Hartley, I'm representing your wife in your separation. She's indicated you're amenable to a straightforward settlement. Is that what she said? I asked. A slight hesitation. She mentioned you understood the situation. Which situation would that be? Specifically? Another pause, thinner this time. The division of assets, including recent inheritance funds. Has she shown you documentation of these funds? She's provided statements, he said carefully. Recent ones, from approximately 3 months ago. I made a note. And transfer confirmations? She's indicated those are forthcoming from the bank. I see. My voice stayed even. Has she also mentioned the structure of the inheritance? The irrevocable trust established by my late aunt. The legal impossibility of what she's claiming to have done. There was silence on the line. Mr. Lawrence, I continued, calm but firm, I suggest you verify the information you've been given before proceeding. My attorney will send relevant documentation to your office today. I hung up before he could reply. Afterward, I drove to Brightstone Bank, where Kendra and I had kept our personal account for years. The manager, Harold, had been with us through mortgage refinancing 2 years earlier. He greeted me warmly, then led me into his office. I need to review recent activity on all joint accounts, I explained once the door was closed. Harold nodded, and pulled up the information. As he scrolled, his expression shifted, professional composure giving way to discomfort. There have been significant withdrawals, he said finally, over the past 3 months. How significant? I asked. Harold turned the monitor toward me. Line after line of transfers glowed on the screen. Small at first, 2,000 here, 3,500 there. Then bigger. The most recent, 47,000 just 2 weeks ago. I pointed at the receiving account number. Is that with Brightstone? Harold shook his head. No, it's external. Northern Lakes Credit Union. I'd never even heard of it. Print the full transaction history for the past 6 months. As the printer hummed, my phone buzzed. A text from Thomas. Lawrence requesting urgent meeting. Tone significantly changed. By the time I slid the printouts into a folder and drove back downtown, the picture was sharpening into something undeniable. The Northern Lakes account had been opened 8 months ago, in Kendra's name alone. The listed address? An apartment in Scottsdale, Arizona. Total drained from our joint accounts, $178,250. She's been building a new life for a while, Thomas observed grimly. While still using mine to fund it, I added. We were still combing through the records when Thomas's assistant stepped in. David Lawrence is on the line. Thomas answered, putting it on speaker. I've received the trust documentation, Lawrence said. His voice had tightened since our last exchange. It appears my client may have misrepresented certain aspects of the financial situation, including her ability to access or transfer those funds. Thomas didn't miss a beat. That appears to be the case. And for the record, my client has already filed for divorce, citing financial misconduct. Silence on the line, the kind that confirms victory. The documentation speaks for itself, Thomas said flatly. When the call ended, he leaned back in his chair. He'll drop her by end of day. No legitimate attorney wants to stay attached to this mess. And the money she already drained? I asked. We'll include it in the filing. Document everything. Let her explain to a judge why she set up a hidden residence and systematically emptied your accounts. I nodded, though the victory felt hollow. The betrayal ran deeper than I'd let myself believe. This hadn't been impulsive. It was deliberate, a strategy executed over months while she slept beside me, laughed across the dinner table, made plans for a future she'd already abandoned. There's one more thing, I said quietly. I need to know who he is. Thomas studied me for a long moment, then nodded. I'll have someone dig. That evening, the doorbell rang. A courier stood on the porch, envelope in hand. Delivery for Miles Hartley. Inside was a formal notice. David Lawrence withdrawing as Kendra's counsel. Copies sent to her and the court. Paperclipped to the front was a note from Thomas. First domino. Minutes later, my phone lit up. Kendra. I let it ring out. She called 3 more times before texting. What the hell did you do? I ignored it, fixed myself a sandwich at the kitchen counter. Mid-bite, an email from Rita arrived. Subject line, update. The trust company's investigation was complete. 3 months of unauthorized attempts, every detail captured. IP addresses, timestamps, device IDs. The report had been forwarded to their legal department for possible criminal prosecution. No action required from you at this time, Rita wrote. But be aware, this path is now open. I forwarded the report to Thomas. At 9:03, another text from Kendra. We need to talk. Now, through your new attorney, when you have one, I replied. Her answer came fast. You've completely overreacted. I was angry when I sent that email. I didn't actually move anything. That's not what the logs show. A pause. Then what access logs? I didn't respond with explanations. Just a single question. Who is he? 20 long minutes passed before her reply finally appeared. This isn't about him. Name? I typed. Another long pause. Then, Jason. But he's not important. Jason Berkeley. Just a friend helping me through this. You're focusing on the wrong thing. I didn't respond. Instead, I searched. Jason Berkeley, yoga instructor in Scottsdale. Former investment broker, according to his LinkedIn. Left finance 3 years ago, citing a desire for more meaningful connections. The next morning, I stopped by Frank's house. The guy you saw dropping Kendra off? I began. Would you recognize him again? Frank nodded. Tall, beard, gray Tesla. I pulled up the photo from Kendra's email. This him. He squinted, then nodded again. Yeah, same guy. Came around 5, 6 times while you were away. I can give a statement if you need. I thanked him. That was all I needed. At 11 a.m., Thomas called. We've got a complication. Kendra hired Philip Barnes. The name landed like a stone. Barnes had a reputation. Cutthroat, expensive, relentless. He's already filed for an emergency hearing, Thomas went on. Claims every financial decision was discussed and agreed upon. When? Monday morning. 3 days. I thought of the Scottsdale apartment. The hidden account. The man named Jason who had stood in my house while I was away. Then let's give Barnes something to think about. That afternoon, Thomas delivered a package to his office. Inside, the trust company's access logs. 6 months of bank withdrawals. The Scottsdale lease in Kendra's name. Frank's notarized statement about Jason's visits. And screenshots from Kendra's private renovation folder, complete with notes on how to access my accounts. By 5 p.m., Barnes called back. His tone had shifted. My client would like to discuss settlement. Thomas relayed the offer. Clean split. She keeps what she already took, makes no further claims. You retain the house, the inheritance, everything else. Counter, I said. She returns half of what she stole from the joint accounts. Signs a non-disclosure. In exchange, I don't pursue the fraud angle. Thomas arched an eyebrow. You could press harder. Get more. I don't want more, I said. I want done. Kendra would transfer $89,275, half of what she'd taken from the joint accounts, within 24 hours. She would make no claims against the inheritance or any other assets. She would sign a non-disclosure agreement barring her from ever discussing our marriage or divorce. In exchange, I would not pursue fraud charges. Through the glass walls, I watched her face as Thomas handed over the evidence file, photographs, statements, account logs. Her expression shifted from defiance to shock to something close to defeat. She glanced toward the room where I sat, then quickly looked away. Barnes leaned in, whispered. She nodded slowly. 10 minutes later, they entered. My client accepts the terms, Barnes said. Thomas slid the agreement across. Kendra signed without reading, her handwriting shaky but firm. I added my signature, then pushed a smaller envelope toward her. What's this? She asked, the first words she'd spoken all day. The passwords, I said. Cloud storage. House alarm. Anything you'll need to collect what you left behind. Her eyes finally met mine. Searching for anger, for triumph, finding neither. She looked more lost than I'd ever seen her. It was never about the money, I said quietly. That would have been simpler. Barnes touched her elbow, guiding her to stand. She clutched the envelope as they left, never looking back. 6 months later, I sold a house on Victory Drive. Too many rooms, too many ghosts. A young family with twins moved in. They loved the wraparound porch, the hydrangeas along the stone path. I chose a loft downtown. Fewer rooms, fewer things. Rita helped restructure my aunt's inheritance into a foundation for architectural scholarships, aimed at kids who had lost parents. The first recipient, a 17-year-old from South Georgia. Her essay on designing spaces that heal moved the selection committee. Elaine would have loved her, Rita said as we presented the award. I thought of my aunt often, her quiet wisdom, her insistence that anything worthwhile required equal parts vision and vigilance. One afternoon, collecting mail in a lobby, I found an unmarked envelope. Inside, a check for $89,275 and a single line in uneven handwriting. The rest of what I owed. No signature, none needed. That evening, I walked down to the riverfront where Kendra and I had once imagined a joint venture. A wellness space I would design, she would run. A dream that had died long before the marriage did. I sat on a bench, watching the cargo ships drift past, the check still folded in my pocket. Tomorrow, I'd deposit it into the foundation account. Another scholarship, another chance to build something that might last. My phone buzzed. A text from Jerry. Dinner's still on for 7, bringing that architect I mentioned. I glanced at my watch. Just enough time to walk home, change, and head to the restaurant. Just enough time to decide to say yes to whatever came next. On my way back, I typed my reply and stood to face the evening. Because sometimes the strongest answer to betrayal isn't revenge. It's rebuilding.